All right. So welcome everyone to the webinar. I know that some of you are already joining early. It is so great to have you here today. I'm really excited to get started with our webinar in just a few minutes on nonprofit email, designing a magical generosity experience with the one and only Tim Sarantonio, the Director of Corporate Brand at Neon One. So let's get the engagement going. So let me see who's here. I would love to hear from you and where you're from in the chat. Where are you now, Tim?
Me? Oh, well, I'm not traveling anymore for a bit. I'm in upstate New York, back where I hang my hat, as they so to speak. But yeah, we got Nebraska and Iowa.
Amazing.
Hello, hello.
I'm in Brooklyn
You're in
for
Brooklyn.
anyone that's around here. We have some California,
Dallas. I was just in Richardson, Douglas, actually. West Tennessee, Philadelphia, Rhode Island.
I love this. I love seeing where everyone is. I hope the weather is good where everyone is.
Hi, Chad.
Oh, Chad's here. Wow.
LA, Portland. Nice spread. Nice geographic spread, which is what I always appreciate. Yeah, it's good. That's good. It also shows that the chat's working, folks. So we're going to want you to keep that up. I'm going to be paying attention to that.
Exactly. And so as we get started with our webinar today, I want to let everyone know that this is going to be recorded. You will get this in your inbox tomorrow, as well as the slides, and we're going to send you the actual report to download in that as well, but you should grab it today while we're here, and any other resources that come up in the process of our conversation. So keep an eye out tomorrow in your inbox. You'll get the recording and the slides, so don't worry. I'll keep repeating that in the chat as well. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you all here today. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Community Boost, Community Boost is a digital marketing agency for nonprofits, and we exist to empower social ventures changing the world. This year, our goal is to work directly with about 500 organizations to help them raise $50 million in online revenue. And we do that through a bunch of different channels, Google Ad Grant Management, Meta Ads, really any kind of digital advertising you can think of. Name it, we do it, and as well as SEO and so much more. If you are interested in learning a little bit more and chatting with our team of digital marketing experts, feel free to go ahead, fill out this form, and we'll get a meeting booked with you right away to learn a little bit more about your goals and how we can help you reach them. And so, yeah, that is really it for me. I just really am excited to learn from Tim today. I've known Tim for many years. He's one of the smartest people I know. He's the Director of Corporate Brand at Neon One. And he's an internationally renowned speaker on generosity, technology, and the trends in the social good sector. He's helped many causes raise over $3 million. And then he moved into providing support for thousands of nonprofits through his work at Neon One. And he has spoken at AFP Icon, NTC, TEDx, and holds a certificate in philanthropic psychology from the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. And Tim, I'm just so excited to hear about this report today. I've read it myself, or much of it, and it is absolutely incredible. All of these insights are so helpful in really helping nonprofits deepen their engagement through email. So, and we all know that it is the most effective channel. So excited to hear more from you.
Well, thank you, Candace, for having me, into the Community Boost team for putting this together. I'm very excited, maybe not as much as the Lakeland, Florida contingent is in the chat in terms of their excitement, but I am pretty jazzed. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen. We should be able to see that. And what we're going to do is dive into a lot of different things today, but hyper focused on nonprofit campaign emails specifically. And so Neon One has come out with a groundbreaking new report. It's the largest analysis of nonprofit campaign email that's come together. If you are interacting with Abby Jarvis in the chat, she is the one who wrote the report, by the way. And so we're pretty excited, but we also designed this to be very tactical, to be very practical. And that's what we're excited to dive into for you today, because the nonprofit email is very powerful in driving engagement, in driving impact. But we want to do this and unpack this through the lens of what we call generosity experience design. And this is just a strategic planning framework to help you better understand how to use technology in connecting with people. So first, I do want to start there, and then we're going to use this planning and mindset framework on how you execute technology against email specifically. This is something that's designed to be very easy to pick up, understand, and apply. And first, though, let's get the chat going. I want to learn more about the crowd here. No polls or anything like that. Feel free to chat out. How long you have been raising money from individual fundraiser or individual donors, for instance? Has it been, your personal career, not your organization? How long have you been doing this? So has it been a few years? Are you new to the sector? Have you been doing this for a while? Okay, Misty has been since January, for instance, right? Then we got Deanna, who's 13 years. So interesting, a really nice spread. Really interesting spread. Okay, so second question, as you folks get into it, is when you are tracking your marketing and fundraising activity and the impact that you want to showcase, how many different systems are you using for that? How many different data sources? 1 to 3 for Josh. 2 to 3, 2, 1. Courtney, 5 plus. Awesome. Okay. And so the answers here are very emblematic across the board of what the typical experience is for a nonprofit. Now, the final question is, do you struggle with this when it comes to connecting the data and understanding marketing, revenue, and impact? Is this easy or is this hard? Do you struggle? Yes. 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 Absolutely. Hard. Yes. Not easy. Yes. Somewhat. Yes. For sure. Okay. Awesome. And the reason I want to flag this is that not only are we not alone, and most of the time, all of you are being asked to do 100 things and you only have time for 10. The reality is that this is a typical experience for probably 97% of the entire nonprofit sector in particular. We've done a lot of research on this, and there's also some really interesting insights that have come out since the pandemic on where the future of our sector is. And we are actually at a crossroads of generosity. And a big reason of this is how we've structured the technology to support folks like you. Basically, it's not working. The answers here, what you've just said, show that what we've structured and given you as a sector is not working. And so it's not working for everybody involved. It's not working for donors. Only half of U.S. households, according to the newest data from the Lilly School, as well as what we're seeing in the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, is that people are finding it a struggle to put their trust into nonprofits. But it doesn't mean that the for-profit sector has done any better. In fact, there's a lot of red flags on the potential privatization of our sector. And so what happens is that for-profit technologies, when they run into economic issues, like what we've seen during especially the past few months, they cut and run. Amazon Smile ending, MailChimp increasing their pricing on their email platform on the smallest level. Things like that. And ultimately, communications are one of the biggest things that donors cite as why they have a broken trust in the generosity experience itself. And a generosity experience that leads to this and this crisis point of more and more people thinking, I don't know if this is where I'm going to be able to make the biggest impact. Everybody on this call knows that absolutely, if you were given the capacity, that you can make transformative change. And so we need to rethink how all of this is put together. And we need to view this through what's a lens that we call here of generosity experience design. And generosity experiences ultimately is just a framework to think about how marketing, revenue, and impact data come together. So when people are saying you're using two systems, they're using, different systems, things of that nature. Well, that's actually one of the biggest issues here, is that disconnect. And what it means is that when we get something coming in from our online donations and then entered into our CRM, and then that's ported over to our marketing or our reconciliation for finance, that it's creating disconnects on when you are talking to people. We're actually designing things with like LIBUNT reports as the first thing, right? I used LIBUNT reports last year, but unfortunately not this year. It was like my favorite report in the world. Here's the issue. If you start with money, you're already off track. This actually came up during a session at NTC in Denver that Candace hosted with Julia Campbell, where people were asking about, how do I start to design content where somebody is in the donor's journey? And the reality is that if your answers immediately begin with how much money that they've given, that's the wrong way to approach it. And this will connect practically into email and what we've seen with our data. Because the experience of connecting with people is what we need to focus on. It's not that we're trying to provide customer service. These are not customers. These are supporters. These are donors. These are event registrants and volunteers. These are not people buying something from you. What they're doing is investing in a belief and putting that belief and trust into you. You are inviting them in to make an impact. And technology should be there to accelerate that. The reason is that most of our technology and the ways that we communicate with donors are based off of this as a success framework. The donor pyramid. How many of you have seen this? How many of you have had presentations where this is what is shown as how you should cultivate major gifts? This is how you build your pipeline. Let me see in the chat if this is a thing that, other people say, this is what success looks like. Many times. Yes. My contention is that this is emblematic of a scarcity mindset in our sector. What we are looking at is literally encapsulated in there's only so much money to go around. And the reality is that donors don't react like this. They don't think like this. What they think like is this. Generosity experiences are fluid, organic, and controllable. It's not just trying to push a rock up a pyramid to get toward that. It is flowing. And if you think of it like this, that they are on a journey with you, and some of them may leave. You could see that. That's okay. Things like retention, acquisition, these are numbers that are important. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is think of it like it is a journey that they are going on. A generosity experience is like this. I told someone last week the bad thing about living in a small town, you have the same 80 nonprofits going after the same 50 businesses. And what this does is it doesn't take into account the larger ecosystem that we're all operating in. So Chad is getting into something that's important, which is understanding your audience and designing for your audience and their unique connection to you. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is shift people away from giving because they were asked and giving because they believe this is who they are, and your nonprofit is a way that they are showing their identity and their passion. And notice, Deborah said something about a large town with 1,500 organizations. This is a struggle for everyone. So why is email one of the best investments that you can focus on for your engagement? Well, there's a lot here, and there's a lot here for both the Chads and the Deborahs in terms of the size of the organization that you were doing. So first, I want to get into why we're going to even talk about email in the first place from Neon One's report perspective, because what we're going to do is kind of give you a genesis of how we arrived to why is email so important and why did we approach the design of the report this way and what was actually in the report. After that, I'll end things with some breakdowns on 3 concrete ways that you can start to think about implementing email to make something magical for your donors, right? Technology is not the magic. You're the one providing the magic, but you need the capacity to do that. And that's what we kept hearing. The way that Neon One does pretty much everything is very community driven. So, for instance, somebody wants to suggest optimizations to what goes into our CRM. You can go to a suggestions portal. People can vote on that. You can see it very publicly. There's conversations happening with our development team. There you go. And that happens every single month. We've had over 1,400 submissions in the past few months alone. Many of those are being put into production because we listen. And the same thing with our research. So last year, we put out a report about donor individual giving trends that we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic. And there was one little form that was kind of hidden, if I'm going to be honest, and it allowed somebody to say, what research do you think we should focus on next? And this was submitted the second day after the report was released. Results-oriented communication strategies. Somebody took the time and submitted this on the form, and that got us thinking, wait a second. What's going on here? And what we also kept hearing is people saying, but why? Why are people doing this? Why are they responding to this way? Why are they giving to this charity but not that charity? And I didn't have an answer. But I did know that because of the breakdown in analysis between things like fundraising and marketing, that we had to start there. So the state of nonprofit email, 48% of donors cite email as their preferred method of communication. And this is a powerful, powerful statistic. This is from the pandemic. Data Axle did some research on this, and they looked at all the different ways that you might engage with folks. Direct mail is included in this. Email is by and far one of the preferred methods, regardless of the age or wealth capacity of the individual. Email is something that pretty much everybody uses to a meaningful extent. But the issue is that the majority of the insights of how we plan were either from small research projects, great things like what Next After does, and we cite a few of their experiments in there, or it's marketing case studies like somebody puts out and talks about a great thing that they did. The issue with case studies is that they're a snapshot in the context of the nonprofit that they are trying to make look good in that standpoint, right? So it's always, what is the larger trend and the larger benchmark that we need to look at? That's always where my eye goes, at least when it comes to this. There's nothing bad about case studies by any means, but what's the context of that? And so I like looking at things at scale, but there was a big lack of information on what smaller nonprofits in particular were doing. So the two main data sources that we had available for email before our report were MailChimp benchmarking data, basically saying this is the open rate of nonprofits, the click-through rate, et cetera. Good, but it only looked at lists 1,000 emails or above. Little problematic. Then the other option was the M&R benchmarks, and that's fine. M&R is great, but it's 187 nonprofits doing a survey. It's self-reported. And this does drive a lot of the conversations about what we do, but we're starting to see other research and other things round that out. Community Boost has done their own research, right? So there's a lot of great options that are coming up. This is just our spin on it. So who's represented in this report? And it does cover even all the different geographies. Jenny, I've heard, and we can even get into in the Q&A section how you can engage rural communities, because we've done some research and analysis there when it comes to giving. So, lot of cool things within that. And so what's in this report is 1,495 organizations that were analyzed. 37,472 actual campaigns. That's something that was sent out to people and actually landed in their inbox, and we successfully engaged 157 million plus emails that got delivered. And so what's very interesting about this is that it started to give a really really kind of nuanced picture to how nonprofits approach and execute email. And so what we then started to do is break this down even further and go, okay, what are small nonprofits versus large nonprofits doing? And we're going to define this around kind of the MailChimp metric. Because once we saw that when we blended everything together, that we were within the benchmark, spitting distance of what MailChimp put out. There wasn't anything like really weird at scale. So that said to us, okay, we're on the right track here. Then we said, okay, but what's happening small versus large? And what happened there was very interesting. But we defined it between 250 to 999 emails. Now, depending on this, I'd be interested to see how many people feel that they fit in the small versus the large list size, because this isn't necessarily revenue. This isn't revenue. We did look at that, and there is some correlation here, obviously, but we looked at the size of the list whenever it's sent out. So 250 to 999, we define that as a small. Above 1,000, that's a large. And then everything blended together is the average. And what I figure is we're going to have a mix in this meeting as well. And so check out the number of emails that are sent out between the two of them, 22 for the small, 27 for the large. Typically, that's more than, once a month, maybe once a month, twice a month, or a higher concentration during something like a Giving Tuesday or end of the year. And the reason that we also filtered out anything below 250, and Danny, all good if you're in there, that's fine. But we did find that under 250 at scale, a lot of weird things happened. Either people were sending, basically using something like a mass email to send 7 people a board reminder for a meeting. Like, don't do that. Or event reminders. Fine. Like, that's not what we're looking at, though. We're looking at appeals. We're looking at newsletters. That's what this is. And so when we're talking about 27 emails, for instance, it is email campaigns, not 27 people that received it, or 27 on the list. So 27 email campaigns per year. So we also went on to, in the report, actually define the anatomy of an email, because to talk about email, we need to be on the same page. And so this is another important element, because we started even rolling out in our community a few insights, like preview text. We'll get into that later, but preview text was performing very well if you use it versus not. And so we dropped this in. We have a community, people can discuss. It's a Slack group. And I was really excited. There's a dedicated channel called Data Drop that we, try to put out different research and reports and insights like this. So I gave a little bit of a preview. Drives my team nuts, but I do it. And so when I said, oh, wow, like preview text, really, really like effective. Very first thing somebody said is, what's preview text? And it was somebody who's very engaged in the community. And yes, the slides will be available. And so what was interesting was to step back and go, we have to stop making assumptions that people know everything that we're talking about here too. So we did define methodology. We did define the terms. We did define what to focus on, and also called out caveats around things like open rates, which have really kind of affected the capabilities of proper analysis, because Apple did some weird things. So we'll get into that though. But it's important to have a shared language when it comes to this. When we say subject line, when we say salutation, this is what we mean. And so the key sections of the report that you'll be able to check out, and thank you to Candace and Abby for kind of clarifying or dropping how to download that. The 4 sections in here are the benchmarks, which we're going to get into. A little bit of a drill down into some of the qualitative items. We did partner with a nonprofit operating system to use artificial intelligence and analyze emotional sentiment and what drove engagement there. We will get into that a little bit today, and also how to create effective emails. Our team, specifically Abby, outlined 5 really helpful practical tips, a few of which I've drawn out for our presentation today that we'll hear about in the back half of the presentation. But we also did look at, out of the 37,472 campaigns, 1 was basically told a very interesting story. It's the most engaging email of all of 2022, sent by an organization called Science Olympiad. We also have a case study of them on the Neon One website. So lots of different things to unpack. But what are the 3 key insights that you should know? And then we can get into the practical things as well as Q&A. And I am paying attention to the questions as well as the continued chat. But where are the 3 key insights? First, nonprofits need their own benchmarks. That's the biggest thing that we learn. So, okay, I'll throw this out here. What day of the week is the best day to send something like a newsletter? Pop it into the chat. What do you think it is? Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Candace loves this question. Tuesday, Thursday, Thursday. You should test your own audience. We're going to touch on that. Absolutely. Saturday. The answer is Friday. A lot of people say things like Tuesdays and Thursdays because that's what we're typically told, right? You read the blog and the blog says Tuesday or Thursday. That data is drawn from for-profit sources like the Active Campaign. And so this goes to one of the things, the role of benchmarks. First, benchmarking this is the hierarchy of how you benchmark properly for your organization. You start with what might be happening at scale across everything. If you can get information that is more specific to your size and mission or the way that you operate, that's even better. And then the best benchmarking is the one you do against yourself. Don't look at our report and go, well, this is how it should be. Beat it. Be better for your audience. Average open rates, click-throughs, unsubscribes, bounces, these are starting points for your analysis, but we needed our own. And up until this point, we had nothing that told us what the broad spectrum of the sector was doing. We were only really just listening to the 3% that make over $5 million or more. Now we have something that is for everybody. So now we can have a better conversation, in our opinion. It's not the end of the conversation, though. So Friday was an interesting one. That was just one example of why we need our own, because we might be making operational decisions based off of large data sets or blogs that perform well because they have SEO strategy behind it to pump it up so it's the first thing you see on the page. Well, that's fine, but the reality is that we need our own data. And what our data tells us leads into second insight. Small nonprofits outperform large nonprofits in several key metrics, specifically engagement as well as effectiveness of email per contact and the money raised. So when we looked at that list between 250 and 999 people, the small nonprofits outperformed in engagement as well as cost per dollar raised, basically. And so small nonprofits have an astounding 10.24% click-through rate. It's great. So good. Remember, the average, I'll go back real quick. Click-through rate, 3.29%. Small nonprofit, 10.24%. But Tim, it's because they're small. Well, okay. I saw somebody say I'm a higher education institution. I have a large list. What can we learn? What are they doing right? And how can technology scale those insights? You're always going to have, as the more numbers you add, you're going to have lower engagement rates. That's just math, basically. Usually, Science Olympiad flew in the face on that for some of their stuff. But to Destiny's point, you're trying to build connections, relationships. And so when we get into the tactical approach of how generosity experience design helps us get there, that's the key here. And so Freddie, Destiny are on the right track here. This is what we can learn. It also, we were able to break down the average number of money raised per campaign as well as per email on file. And small nonprofits were raising $6.15 per email contact on file when they're sending out their appeals and things like that, compared to the average of a typical nonprofit of $1.11. And large nonprofits are smaller than that. And again, they might be raising more at scale. That's what we did fine. But per pound for pound in terms of email, a lot of it comes down to the fact that there's been a closer connection built. Which leads to our final point, which is what you say and how you say matters. So we already talked about day of the week. We did also talk about time. We looked at time. Using specific words and phrases in the subject line are going to impact things like click-through rates, open rates. This is the analysis that we did in the report. I'm going to save that. This is a big reason why you should download the report, is the emotional sentiment. I will give you at least some of the top insights there. Let me flip through because we have a physical report handy here. Top performing subject line emotions: relief, in order: relief, gratitude, pride, excitement, and optimism. Do your emails evoke those emotions? Is that the relationship that you are building with these folks? That's the real question here. But it also extends to the images, the salutations. Hi, friend. Warm and fuzzies, right? Calls to action as well. And so what you're going to be able to actually start to really draw a connection is, how do I start to shift from that situational gift that they happen to see the call to action, and that this is when they open it on that Friday afternoon, this is the easiest decision that they can make, is to give to your organization. So a lot of industry best practices have addressed these concepts. What was great about this, and what people have responded so enthusiastically, Abby can speak to this as well. People, we in person, replying to our email inbox when we're putting this stuff out in presentations like this, what people are doing is they're starting with our data and then going back and having a real better understanding of what matters to them. And that's what I'm excited about for you, because you can start to think about what language, what images are going to help and support me in building that connection. So how can we make this magical for you? Because I want some good time. So this is my last section, and then it will be good Q&A time. So first, rule number one. Remember, rule number one of Generosity Experience Design: you focus on people, not money. So how can you work to build an emotional connection with your audience? First, by starting with your audience. Don't start with your content and say, I'm going to write a newsletter. Say, who am I writing a newsletter for? Who am I writing an appeal for? And establishing segments actually helps you more quickly tailor the copy without having to rely on too many merge tags that might have something weird happen, especially at scale. So when I say merge tag, this is kind of like that constituent first name thing. That's cool. Do that. But a lot of people start to try to over-engineer. We've heard this a lot with like MailChimp, for instance. Can you push all these custom fields in? And that's fine. And we'll get to that, especially in the last part of Generosity Experience Design's rules on technology and scale. But the reality is that if you can start with a deeper understanding solely on who's in that number on that list, right? You set up your newsletter list, and maybe you start to set up segments that are more tailored, specific to their affinity or why they're there in the first place. Or yes, if you have nothing like that, then maybe you can start with at least money. But I think it's a lot better to start with something like, let's say you're an animal organization and they've adopted from you before. That's a yes or a no question that's on the record. That's your segment. You can talk to people and know that they've adopted from you or that they haven't. That's a different conversation that you're having with them. And personalization definitely supports this. And there's a lot of data that shows that the more that personalized communications reach people, especially in things like email, it stands out. And Next After found that a personalized salutation had a 26% lift in click-through rate, as an example. The other thing that's often drawn from the direct mail world is the copy itself and how many times you're using the word you in your copy. Now, we did not do a super deep copy analysis on the 37,000 campaigns. So, and good questions. I'm going to hold both of these. Noel's question, maybe Abby, I might throw to you, actually, when it comes to level tests, but Hemingway's one thing there. Okay, so when you get down to this, using the word you definitely supports and is accelerating things like click-through rate. The most engaging email of 2022, Science Olympiad used it 10 times. So focus on people. What is the value that your content is bringing it to them? And that also extends out into the experience of connection too. And so remember, rule number 2, focus on the experience of connection with people. And so designing emails isn't just about writing copy and choosing images. It's about the flow as well. So first, what's the imagery? So this is drawn from one of my favorite nonprofits, IPH, Interfaith Partnership for the Homeless here in upstate New York. And so they sent this out through our email builder as an example. And this is, the nice image and the copy, and it's inviting you in. I want to share Thomas's story with you. After struggling with his mental health for years, Thomas found himself in jail. When he was released, Thomas didn't have a home to return to. That's when he found Danielle's house. While at our shelter, Thomas was able to access mental health, and it goes on. And so this Amsterdam, I know what that is geographically, for instance. That's Amsterdam, New York, not in Europe, right? And so these little things, these little stops along the way to build that affinity and identity, you could be very strategic about that. But picture can, picture paints 1,000 words, right? So images matter here. Also make your copy scannable, break it up. Don't do long paragraphs that people have to scan, especially on mobile devices. That can hurt people's eyes. That can, the eye is lazy and it's going to gravitate toward white space generally. So you want to be able to break things out. And also keep in mind accessibility. So ensuring that you're doing things like alt text, that you are, choosing colors in the CTA buttons that you may do that make sense and that are supportive of different ways that people might digest that information. And then finally, use technology to accelerate. So I did see a question about tech. I'll get to that in a moment in terms of tech stack items. Regardless of my vendor affiliation, I'm going to just tell it to you straight. And technology a lot of times is kind of the flashy thing that vendors like to throw in front of you and say, this is the silver bullet, come here and this will solve all your problems. Look at these amazing rates and stuff. And it's like, okay, maybe. But none of this stuff is going to get used if you haven't put it in its proper context. But when you do, it gets real cool. And so this is when you've covered the basics, your segments. I've, answered Michelle's question on which ones to do, for instance, and then you can start to make it interesting. So dynamic merge tags could definitely be used. Like imagine we're going back to our example on the animal organization. Maybe I'm collecting something through another survey or another area or through some other medium I have on file that I have their cat's name. Maybe I actually coordinated with the program people and I have the cat's name that they adopted. Put that in the email. Hey, remember, tell us how Felix is doing. That's a button. That's a call to action. That's a way to invite somebody to continue to share the story with you. Oh, they're talking to me. And so you could be very strategic if you're working with different kind of causes. You can't always do this, definitely, especially if in the more sensitive causes like healthcare, domestic violence, things of that nature. You have to think differently about this. That's very contextual, but you can still personalize. You can still do things that speak to them. And Canva can also be a very cool way to leverage this because they can get you the specific sizes that fit well within whatever email builder that you're using, and you can zhush it up. You can make it pop. You don't have to be a graphic designer anymore in order to make something beautiful. You have that power because of tools like Canva. The technology is there to make your life easier, and they have a free nonprofit plan. So things like Canva, you can even use that to zhush up your stock imagery. There's a lot of cool things that you can do when you intentionally think about this from a design standpoint. Generosity Experience Design is very holistic in how it attempts to merge the data with the experience. And that leads to even what is the next step in the story? What's the call to action? The button itself. What's the words on that? You have to think this through. It has to make narrative sense. from the beginning stage of the outer envelope of your email. That's the subject line. That's the sender name. That's the preview text. That's going to get somebody to open it and then click in. And then the copy carries that through. Each element of the tech has a role to play. And what this report does is contextualize what to care about. But you can build something very, very beautiful, very affordably. Email is probably the most affordable communication tool that you have at your disposal. Social media comes with a cost too, right? But email, that's your data. That's yours. And so that's why email can be very, very powerful and why it's driving effective engagement for nonprofits, small and large. So we've dropped how to download the report a few times. I'm going to get into Q&A. But if you want to get the report, you can go to that URL. Or we got the QR code scanner thing. If you're like, Tim, the QR code's not working, check the chat. Candace just dropped it, one of the last things. That's kind of the basics. That's what I got. That's the magic for today.
I love this report. I love that you took the time to really study and dive deep into what is happening with email in the nonprofit sector. Like you said earlier, it is so important for us to have our own data.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been really incredible. Please go ahead and download the 2023 nonprofit email report. You can keep it, keep these learnings and take even more home with you. So yeah.
Well, we got some questions. So
there's tons of questions.
Just kind of your housekeeping item. What about the recording? People are asking about that.
Yes. So you're gonna get the recording, the slides, and the link to the report in your inbox tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that.
Cool. All right, let's get into it. What segments do you recommend and associated CTAs? Oh, that's a good one. I again, this is that infuriating it depends answer, but I think some standard segments are going to be really kind of zeroed in on affinity and how much engagement that they've had. So like volunteers, they should have their own segment. You should treat those people in a very special way. You could start with donors. Like if you have nothing when it comes to personal information, psychographic information, one, it's time to think about donor surveys. So you can build this. So that's one step before segments is donor surveys to obtain the data that we're talking about. And if in the absence of that, you got your standard kind of new donor type stuff, major donor, however you define that. Well, major donor is $1,000. Great. Everybody has a different definition for major donor, right? So that's where the money stuff is fine. You can always layer that in. I think it's best to start with your segments based off of their affinity and their level of engagement with your content, your programs, your overall contributions that they can provide. CTAs, then, it depends on the campaign that you're running. What's the point of the CTA? What are you asking them to do? That's actually the real answer there is the CTA needs to match the experience. Like if you're sitting there and let's say you sent a postcard out and the postcard is like, go watch this video, and then it asks you to download an email and you get into a welcome series, and then the CTA after that is like sign up for the postcard. It's like, what the hell did you just make me do here? Right? Very circular. Make it make sense. Map it out. Like literally get a notepad and go, okay, first stop here, right? Like do that. Like literally map out the experience, and the CTA is one of those things. Candace, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite things I see nonprofits do is to think about not just the CTA and the email, but like the experience of whatever it is you're driving them to after it. So like if you're sending an email and you're asking for a $50 monthly donation, or something like that, when they click on that CTA to give $50 a month, for example, what does it look like on the page? Is that defaulted for them? Can they go ahead and really move through that whole process with a consistent CTA, and have it be clear on your landing page as well?
Cool. I guess I'll tackle Noel's one, the fresh Kincaid grade level to review your copy. I don't personally use that one. I use a combination of Grammarly and Hemingway when I need to do things, but there's a lot of different options there. Abby, this is like reviewing copy for grade level testing. If you want to chime in, if you're still here, we're also doing a podcast in a little bit. So, I can't. Okay. Yeah. I can only type. So, well, I know, Abby, but if you have a like grade level copy reviewer suggestion for people other than,
I mean, I can invite Abby up on the stage.
no offense, but like that's okay. What is the podcast? Oh, the Untapped Philanthropy podcast that I actually host, hence this. So, my biggest tip is to read it out loud. That's a good one. She's like, the report's readable because Abby wrote it. So like, trust her. We've had some tech questions. Okay. Abby wrote, read what you wrote out loud. If you lose your breath in a sentence, make it 2 sentences. If you stumble over something, change it. Love it. Thank you, Abby.
Super helpful, very practical.
Yeah. What's the best email marketing platform? This one's specific to Razor's Edge. As a longtime Razor's Edge user, over 100 hours of training on that platform. Not Online Express, basically. Look at what Zeidman has done, or Omatic, in all honesty, with like MailChimp. The Chimpagration thing is fine. Online Express breaks all the time. I'm biased. Somebody asked where you should hold your email lists. In your CRM and your email tool, if it's good enough. That's my ideal gold standard. If you're interested in Neon CRM that does this and where all this great data came from, cool. Not the point of today. In general, use something that is reliable. MailChimp, Constant Contact, ActiveCampaign, Emma. All of these things are options, but now, Bloomerang has email. Donor Perfect partners with Constant Contact for a deep integration. Is so contextual. The only thing that I'm going to ask is think of it from a generosity experience design lens. How many friction points in the management of your data do you have between marketing, revenue, and impact? The more friction points, the harder your job is. The gold standard, connected platform. But that's all I'm going to say on that, because this is not a product thing.
I just posted the link in the chat as well, if you are
you.
interested in learning more about getting started with Neon One. So
how do you
get a free demo?
Well, thank you for that. But duly noted, moving on. So I am. So I think it's great, but we're going to get to other questions. What's the best way to grow our email list in the first place? Make it clear why they should be on it. Like, what are you going to tell people we're going to do? Why, what's the value? And then if there's a value to that, because people care, they're going to join it. Social media is a good place for this. It's like you had an event, Facebook fundraiser, that type of stuff. Julia Campbell talks about this. Drive people to sign up for your email list, but articulate the point of the email list in the first place. Don't just do newsletters because you are told we're supposed to do newsletters. Like, have an intentional point of where this fits in the generosity experience. And then that will come. Okay. Woo. Oh God, the AI tool. What's the best AI tool for email content cultivation? I mean, this is such a hard one. I'm actually like on the responsible AI framework committee that just got put together. And obviously we partner with somebody who leveraged OpenAI, ChatGPT stuff. I just think you have to train it. If you're going to use AI for any copy generation, like, use it to kickstart ideas, subject line analysis, like that type of stuff. That's good. Load in, like, you can load in even information from the report. Like, according to this, like, go to the blog that Abby wrote and like tell something like ChatGPT, this is the benchmark. What should I do? You have to train it no matter what. This is, Candace, that's like its own webinar. Michael, please connect with me on LinkedIn. We can have a whole conversation about
I
that.
know there's so much there. We should have a whole separate webinar on it. That'd be super interesting. Wait, we'll chat more.
Yeah, there's so much. Wow, the questions are loading in. I think we're gonna cut it 5 minutes of, if that's okay, Candace.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
You source. You tell me who I should go for next.
So yeah, I know. I wanted to get to Freddie's question. So Freddie asked demographics. What happens if you want to get young donors to join your cause? Because your nonprofit helps them. Is email the best way to contact individual donors? Anything you can say to Freddie's question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're talking like oops, I signed up a bunch of youngsters on my app by mistake, Silicon Valley style, or like how young is young? Because there's like legal stuff for communications, and I'm not a lawyer when it comes to that. So if it's like we're talking about 8-year-olds, I don't know. My kid has an email technically. My kid is not touching email, right? So depends on how young is young. But it comes down to what's the intention and listening to your audience, especially depending on demographics, age. Email is all reliable, but it doesn't necessarily automatically translate where your audience is. It's a good one, but test. So if you want to communicate and connect with younger donors, are they there? They probably have an email, but there's a lot of people who they're just using it for administrative items, and they're more likely on something like Twitch or TikTok or Instagram or something like that as like how they're digesting media. So do research. But email is very reliable, and it's still a way that people have to do business. We have to remember this, that like we haven't had the CRM that magically connects to Instagram for all your communication needs. Like that's BS. Most people are not living in social media world practically. They have an address and they have an email. These are very practical things that people tend to have.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, where I'm sure that your demographic,
regardless, 18 to 27, same thing applies. Yeah. Like ask them. Figure out where they are and ask them.
Yeah, and you can still do multi-channel, right?
Yes.
Like you don't have to just use email. That is a channel, and it is proven to be the most effective channel so far from what we've seen.
But it's not the only.
But it's not the only channel. I would actually really try SMS for especially donors in that age range.
Especially like they're really good volunteer pool, and they're really good recurring donor pool. Like that's things to keep in mind is when you're talking about that audience, like what are you trying to do too? Because a generosity experience is matching the discussion with the action. That's ultimately what we're trying to do here is I want them to take an action. What is the most efficient and effective way for me to connect their passion with my ability to deliver on that? And something like recurring giving, there's been some interesting data. I've had some great conversations with organizations that really kind of tailor their recurring giving program for that age group. And they're reaching them in a wide variety of ways, including postcards, direct mail. So very effective ways. Omnichannel is ultimately the way to go no matter what.
Awesome.
What else we got? Maybe one more question.
More questions here. I have AU, is there any data regarding correlation between copy length and engagement, particularly when it comes to monetary conversions? There's
been a lot of research done on direct mail here. And one of the best books that I can point to is Creative Deviations by John Lepp. I think that there's a lot that we can learn from direct mail when it comes to copywriting. I know Abby's going to have even more insights on this than me, but the jury's still out, and this is where we need to do more research, because the data that we looked at in the report didn't get into the depths of the copy where we would be happy with answering that outright with our report. But there has been experiments, case studies, things like that show it depends. Like even Next After has a bunch of stuff that contradicts themselves on this point. There there has been some interesting research, and it didn't make the report itself, on even like hey versus hi or hello as a salutation beginning. Email, less formal. That's okay. So play around for you. Play around for you and experiment. Do maybe one appeal that's long form, one that's short form, and see how they work. I think there's merits to both. There is some data that shows that people do like long form content, but a lot of that is driven from the direct mail side. So,
And that's probably more in the context of like an actual appeal rather than like depending
yeah,
on
newsletter thing. I mean, look, the Science Olympiad email that was the most engaging one, 34% click-through rate, was massively long. So it depends. The worst answer that you can give in these situations, but like it depends. Yeah.
Cool. And I think we have one more question here. So this is perfect. Alejandra asked, what about welcome sequences? What's the best periodicity? And
Yep.
what do you say?
Well, so it should be noted that the research that we focused on was on campaign emails, and there's 3 different types of emails that people can engage with typically through their tech platform. Campaign emails, which is like a newsletter and appeal sent to many people. Welcome sequences are part of what could be talked about as welcome series, nurture emails. They come with a few different names, but that's a different type of email. We didn't analyze that, but we do have a great report and guide on those answers, Alejandra. So, yes, we have a whole thing. There's also a webinar we're doing with Christina Edwards of Splendid Consulting in May on that very question as part of our all things email resource thing. So I would encourage you to check that out. We're going to dive into those answers there specifically.
Is this, as far as your guide, is it the Fundraiser's Guide to Welcome Email series?
That is correct. Thank you,
All
Candace.
right. I'll put that in the chat, and we'll also include that in our follow-up email as an additional resource.
Cool. And Gene, I'm going to say this out loud. This is interesting on our kind of little demographic side, because this backs up what we've been talking about. I recently worked with a project-based learning marketing research class at Northeastern University, good school, and they conducted a research study on Generation Z nonprofit support and donor habits. The outcome: Instagram is the best platform for this demographic, and emails preferred.
Cool.
So social media's engagement, and that I think is it's best to have a conversation there for sure. I hope this was good, folks.
It was amazing. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.
Always wonderful having you.
Turn my light off.
I always learn so much.
Sitting ovation. Thank you, Chad. Thank you.
Ovation.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, this was great. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Yes,
we're here.
it was a pleasure.
We're here to support. We would love people's thoughts on the report. Yeah, let's keep it going. Let's write some great emails, make it magical.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today and spending the last hour with us. It has been lovely to have you all. We will send that follow-up email with the recording, the slides, and the report so that you're able to take all these learnings and more home with you. And as always, feel free to reach out to myself. And I don't know, Tim, if you want to put a way to stay in touch in the chat so people can reach out if they have any more questions.
Yeah. I'll drop Tim at neon1.com.
Perfect.
And also I am on the old LinkedIn. So let me grab that real quick.
Perfect.
And then I should have had that at the ready.
Yeah, no, it's been so wonderful having you, and everyone is pumped. Everyone learned a lot, including myself.
Let's do this. Link to the podcast. We're gonna okay. Everybody wants all the stuff. So Untapped Philanthropy is the podcast. Abby's is not on yet, but if you are a fan of Mallory Erickson, that is our latest episode with me and Corinne Mitchell of Flux. So
love Mallory.
But Abby's, we're going to record that in 2 minutes. So
amazing.
More to come.
Well, thank you again, Tim, for being here. Thank you, everyone, as well, for spending your time with us and learning and engaging. And we'll see you all at the next one, I hope.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks. Take care. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Okay. You too. Bye.
Bye.